Okay, this video is about the top 25 self-help books. So number one is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Good basic stuff for anybody. Good to read while you're young. Easy to understand. Basically it says be nice, get along with people, think about the other person, not just yourself. And a lot of people need that, especially guys. I think women in general have better social skills than guys do. Um, I sort of learned my social skills from hanging around with guys and studying in the library, and I didn't learn much. Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. I remember reading that book when I was young, and that really helped me sort of to organize my thoughts. Covey is one of those Mormon guys. I was impressed by the Mormons. We wrestled against them in college, and they all had suits, nice short cut hair. I mean, they were an impressive group. Hey, a lot of guys, academic All-Americans. Maximum Achievement by Brian Tracy. I like Brian Tracy. I think he's for real. A lot of those sort of self-help type motivational speaker guys are BS artists who never did anything in their life. But Brian Tracy has a lot of experience. He's good. I like Brian Tracy. And that Maximum Achievement, it's a fantastic book to get you psyched up. I used to listen to that in the car, and it would just give me energy. Super Memory, Super Student by Harry Lorraine. Harry Lorraine is like this world famous expert of memory techniques, and that's what young people need. I mean, school is basically a memorization contest all the way through college, so you might as well get good at memorization. It's a big mistake to think school is primarily due to IQ, because then that's a fixed thing. You can't change it. I like the idea of Carol Dweck, the growth mindset. A tremendous amount of academic performance is due to personality. A tremendous amount is due to study skills. So you might as well get that stuff. That's fixable. Having a positive attitude, the right type of attitude, and then having good study skills, that's all trainable. So it's so stupid. The majority of college students, they pay expensive tuition. They don't even know how to study. They kind of set themselves up for failure. It's unnecessary. Okay, now this other guy, Arvin Vohra, for these next two books. This guy's a genius. Lies, Damn Lies in College Admissions, How to Get into an Ivy League. So that's more about, senior in high school getting ready to apply for college. But it's worth reading Arvin Vohra. The guy's a genius. The more anything to do with academics, he's great. Next book is Dress for Success by John Malloy. Some of these books, of course, they'll more apply. My situation when I was a young guy, all I did was wrestle and study pretty much. So I was really kind of socially out of it for things besides wrestling and studying. So I almost had to re-educate myself. Both my parents were fuzzy foreigners off the boat. So they really didn't know how to behave in America high society, even though my dad was a doctor and all that. And so I learned that, for example, I go to Stanford, these guys been to these East Coast prep schools. They got a suit and a tie and all this proper behavior for that type of environment. And I was way behind. I used to walk around in a wrestling t-shirt. So it took me a while to kind of learn how to fit in with that group when I had to. Okay, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Basically, one of his fathers was a real poor guy, his actual father, and Rich Dad was the father of his friend. And it's true, poor people are sort of trained to be poor employees. Rich Dad's a good book. It gets you thinking about how you could be better off financially. Unfortunately, I didn't read this book till I was in my 30s. I wish I had read books like that when I was younger. My dad was wealthy because it was easy to be wealthy as a doctor back in the 1970s and 1980s. But doctors have progressively come down a lot in pay and a lot in respect from society, etc. It's just how it is. And it's not going to change anytime soon. 0 to 1, this guy Peter Thiel's another genius. And you can kind of get his business perspective on things. The real smart people, they break out of convention. Almost all the stuff you'll see recommended through the internet is going to be all superficial, pablum, conventional BS. So the stuff I'm telling you, as far as I know, is most of the best stuff. I can't tell you everything, but I'll tell you as much as I can here, okay? 48 Rules of Power by Robert Greene. That is good. Everybody's always, the good quote is by Carlyle. There's always a good reason, then there's a real reason. They're always going to say it's for some noble reason. But most of the time, it's because whoever's in power, they want more money, they want more power, they want more sex or something. They want to take somebody's property. But they're always going to give you some noble-sounding BS reason. So 48 Rules of Power helps you to see how things work, how they actually work. Typical example was, when I was a young guy, I would always try to think what's right, what's true, and that was sort of like what my father would advise me, and he meant well, but my mom was much better advisor. She would say, no one cares, this is all BS, don't say anything in the meeting. And so I would learn to just shut up, and you don't want to be a show-off. When I was young, I'd want to show off how much I knew, how smart I was, and I annoyed people. And I learned as I got older and I was more quiet and would just sit there in the background quiet, I would end up getting along better with people. And also I stopped trying to talk about books with people because most people could care less about books and don't read. And I learned to just tell a couple of jokes or be quiet and observe rather than talk. All that stuff might sound obvious to somebody with good social skills. I was in my 30s and I read these books about body language and social skills. And then I go up to a bunch of ultrasound technologists who are friends of mine, and I told them about what I learned and what I read. And they're like, "Oh, Dr. Rogers, we learned all that in high school." So I was about 20 years behind on my social skills compared to them. The Prince by Machiavelli is a good book. So 48 Rules of Power by Robert Greene, that's an excellent book. I think everybody should read that, especially guys, because it's sort of the world of men's kind of brutal. A woman, our society kind of likes women more. It hates men. So if you're a man, you better sort of know how things work, because you're going to otherwise end up getting screwed over. The Prince by Machiavelli is good because it helps you to understand politicians. I mean, they all lie. When you try to pick a better politician, you're basically picking the one who's less bad. Good luck finding somebody who is honest and nice in politics these days. So the Prince explains how they think. It's basically a training manual for politicians. And it's all full of dishonesty and lying and power plays and how to trick people. And unfortunately, it's good to read that because that's how the world is. SJWs Always Lie by Vox Day. This is another one of these books, kind of the same thing as these other two here. All about the lying and dirty tricks that are used by people trying to take advantage of you and rip you off. And it's good to know that because when you know it, you see the trick coming, you can label it, and then you get a chance to respond. You're much better off than just being caught by surprise because you don't understand what they're doing. Getting to Yes by William Ury. That's a good book because ultimately what you want is to get along if possible and try to come to some reasonable agreement. And there's probably going to be a little compromise in there, but that's better than wasting your energy arguing over some stupid thing. So that's a good negotiation book. Start with No. That's a good negotiation book. Negotiation and Tricks the Pros Don't Want You to Know by Jim Camp. It's a good book, and it basically talks about when you're negotiating, a real standard thing in negotiation is to wear the other person down, to keep on bullshitting them, and to keep on letting them get their hopes up and then delaying, let them get their hopes up and delay with the effort to wear them out. So if you want to be good at negotiation, you have to understand how it all works. How do you make yourself resilient for the long run? How you want to basically be ready to run marathons and don't be thinking you're running 100-yard dashes because in the real world, bullshit usually is a marathon. It's not a 100-yard dash. So you have to sort of have the physical resilience and sense of purpose and everything else that you can run marathons, intellectual marathons, stressful marathons and all that. And I think one of the best things you do is by getting rid of the caffeine, getting rid of all that stuff, your physical health is optimized, your arterial blood flow is the best, you don't have any toxins messing with your brain, you have a sense of purpose. All those things make you more resilient, able to endure the inevitable ups and downs of life. Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. I really liked that book because I read it when I was young, when I was in college. And it really helped me at that time. And all these great athletes were reading that, world champions, All-Americans, wrestlers that I hung around with. And it got me psyched up. And it basically talks about getting yourself psyched up, putting yourself into a state of mind where you can perform at your best. Office Politics, What They'll Never Tell You by Art Donsteel. It's a good book. It's kind of one of these brutal books, but it helps you because you're going to want to get promoted someday, whatever you do, and recognizing whatever's involved in that. And there'll be all kinds of shenanigans. And so this book will tune you into how to recognize that and give you the best chance of someday being promoted or whatever. Anything to do with that, it's a good book. Charisma Myth by Olivia Cabane. I liked the book just because I sort of needed that at that time, When I was younger, I was a little bit insecure about my social skills because, again, all I did was wrestle and study. So all of a sudden, when I was in a more complex social environment, I was a little awkward for a while. It took me a little while to figure that out. Speak to Win by Brian Tracy. Again, I like Brian Tracy. Speak to Win's good. Pretty much most of what Brian Tracy did earlier in his career was good. As he got older, he sort of just did too much stuff just to go after volume rather than quality, but he's still good. Usually Brian Tracy's, at least he's not going to waste your time. Body language books, pick whichever one you like. Navarro's good. The P's couple are good. There's good videos on TED Talks. And for any of these things, see if you can watch a video. You don't have to buy them, but I'm just giving you these things, especially if you're young and you haven't developed yourself yet. These books were real helpful to me. They accelerated my development. Most of the time development's real slow, and when you read a good book, you can accelerate your development rapidly, and I found all these quite helpful. Mystery Method. Okay, Mystery Method, How to Get Women into Bed by Mystery. Okay, here's what's funny about this book. If you ever read a book about male and female relationships written by a college professor, the book always stinks. Okay, and the book has to stink because there's so many political correctness rules about how to talk about a man or a woman. There's such morons in the university system, they can't even tell you what the difference is between a man or a woman. Okay, anybody who can't tell you the difference between a man and a woman, all you got to do is look at your mother and your father. You know who your mom is, you know who your dad is, you know who your brother is, you know who your sister is, okay? You know who the girls are in your class, you know who the boys are in your class. It's not rocket science, okay? And what I'm basically saying is they can't say anything useful. It's kind of like conventional medicine. They've defined all the chronic diseases as being incurable, so they can't cure any of them. And it don't matter what Ivy League school you go to. They've made themselves into a joke. And so that's what I thought was funny. This guy is kind of a crazy guy who went around to all these bars trying to seduce women. And then he writes about what he observed like a psychologist. And it's also kind of funny because he's like 6'5" tall. And women love tall guys. So a lot of why they liked him is because he was tall, not because he's wearing some stupid hat or some other silly outfit. But nevertheless, despite all that craziness, it's still an entertaining book, and it'll get you thinking. And once you start thinking about that, there's a whole bunch of other books to develop your ability to think through the psychology of the other person. I know that you're thinking, that I'm thinking, that I'm thinking, that you're thinking, and all that, and that stuff helps you in social relationships. Okay, then I just listed some of my books, for what it's worth. Straight A at Stanford and on to Harvard, is How to Crush Academics at the high school, college, and med school level. How to Raise IQ and Become a Genius. Sort of more advanced strategies, also for helping younger kids in their development. Because the school system is not going to help your kid. The school system just wants your kid to obey, gives them a little memorization contest, try to program them, to reject the parents' values, all that type of silly stuff. And they typically make the children hate reading after freshman year when they have to read stuff they're not ready for. Julius Caesar, Mockingbird, and all this other stuff, Great Expectations, all that stuff ruins a child's interest in being forced to read something versus reading for pleasure or for interest. So anyways, Rhyme, Rhetoric, and Logic, that's largely about how does one write effectively, because hardly anybody could write. 1 out of 10,000 people writes well. And that's, I studied like 250 books on writing because I got teased by one of my lawyer friends that he said my writing sucked when I wrote Straight A at Stanford. And so I looked over his criticism, and everything he said was true. I think there was good content in the book, but my skill in writing was really pretty basic, like Strunk and White basic. So anyways, and I went through all the arguments of debate and logic and argumentation to really help a person be stronger on their feet when they argue in writing. And I went through all this stuff about rhetoric and poetry, the Greeks, the Romans, etc. You name it. Pretty much it's like a PhD in writing class is what that's about. Wisdom Quotes was just another book I wrote because it's one of the fastest way to memorize what's useful to you from a different philosopher, author, or person of any spectrum is a couple of their best quotes. I mean, that's how I remember all these persons who inspired me in some ways. I remember a couple of their quotes. And most of the quote books suck. They're written by emotional lightweights. I tried to make that book, sort of heavyweight quotes. How do you make yourself smarter, more resilient? How do you make yourself better able to endure all the things you have to endure to be successful? How do you energize yourself? How do you project a bigger version of yourself so you can become more than you are at the moment? So anyways, hope that's helpful.